Are we on the air?
And we're back. This is Third Coast Radio. Management Kamikaze in the building with the cool kids. Thank you guys for joining us. Of course, if you are listening to us anywhere in the state of Mississippi, man, of course, we are the only show that supports and plays independent music of all genres that you can hear in all 82 counties. So if you're listening to us right now, driving in your car or sitting in your office or sitting at home right now, man, shouts out to all of the independent music lovers. And as promised, at the top of the show, we got something really special for y'all today. All right, we got my man Scott Albert Johnson
Let's
in
go.
the studio.
Yeah.
All right now.
Hello, y'all.
Hey.
Musician extraordinaire, performer extraordinaire. I've known this gentleman for quite a while, and have watched him consistently. He's probably one of the most consistent musicians that exist
Thank you.
in the central Mississippi area, probably in all of Mississippi. You are constantly working and constantly recording and putting out projects and all of this good stuff, and just being creative and being excellent at what it is that you do. So, for those people that are not familiar with who you are, introduce yourself, tell them where you're from, tell us your claim to fame, all of that good stuff.
Well, first of all, thank you for those kind
Absolutely.
words, and it's been great to know you all these years. We actually go back even further, really, back to the high school
We
days.
go back to high school.
Yeah,
We do. Yeah.
So I'm kind of partly from, I guess originally I'm from St. Louis. I was born there.
Okay.
I lived there till I was 9. My parents were from Hattiesburg, so I always had a Mississippi connection. I've been coming to Hattiesburg to visit relatives since I was little. We moved to Tupelo to try to get closer to them when I was 9 for about a year, and then we came to Jackson and when I was going in the 5th grade. And so I was here throughout that time, and that's when I really kind of started getting into music. I'd done a little bit when I was younger, but started playing in bands when I was in 9th grade, playing bass, guitar, and singing, and played all through high school and college. I left, went far away, came back 15 years after leaving, and was mostly in the Northeast, and got back here in 2003. In fact, just last month was 20 years that I've been back, and just last week was 20 years since I met my wife, or kind of re-met her at Howland Mal's.
All right.
So, so I am really, and then I've been playing, pretty regularly since then. So I'm pretty tied into the cultural life of this city,
Right.
and it has definitely fed me over the years for sure.
So you actually ended up leaving Mississippi because you were going to school in the Ivy Leagues, correct?
I went to Harvard. I was a field goal kicker.
I was about to tell the people that you actually were up there, trying out for the Harvard football team.
Yeah.
You were a kicker here at St. Andrews,
Right,
and
that's
you
right.
and you went to the Ivy League to avoid, I guess, the SEC defensive lineman and the SWAC defensive lineman.
Well, I didn't want to get hit quite that hard.
we hit the kickers in the South. They get hit.
What is a kicker anyway?
Right. They
Shouldn't
are
have kicked that ball. Now get up.
definitely in play.
Trust me, I've heard every kicker joke there is. I've told a few myself.
So you actually ended up going up there, and you ended, as a lot of people do, being in school up in the area, you ended up kind of hanging around there.
Yeah, I was in Boston for 4 years. I was in New York for a couple years. Briefly in Ohio. Went out to Southern California for a couple years, kind of a little interlude. Sometimes call those the lost years. And then went back, and I was in D.C. for about 4.5 years. That was my second time there, and that's where I was right before I came back. And that's where I was when I really got back into doing music. I had taken a time away from it for most of my 20s. And when I got back into it, and that's actually when I started playing harmonica, which is kind of what most people kind of know me for around here. I was just thinking it was going to be something I was going to do as a lark. I had a friend I was working with who played guitar. We thought maybe we'd learn a few songs and play a couple parties. And before I knew it, I was gigging all the time, and then not long after that, I started thinking about coming back south. Partly because I wanted to be closer to family. I hadn't lived within 1,000 miles of my parents since I left for college. But also, I was thinking that I was going to come here, stay here maybe 6 months to a year, get my chops up, start working, and then maybe go to New Orleans or Austin or maybe LA or something. I didn't really know.
Right.
But I got together with my wife, and I also I immersed myself so quickly into the cultural life here. I joined Jesse Robinson's band probably within about a week of getting back. Played with him for a couple of years. He's still a great friend.
Yes.
Also was playing in New Orleans a lot without moving there, and so it's I enjoyed being here. I enjoyed the people, the culture, the music scene especially. and like you said, all genres. And that was a real happening time from about 2003 through the end of the 2000s and into the there was just a lot going on. And then we still thought maybe we would move to New Orleans. We were thinking about that. And 2 weeks before our first son was born, Katrina happened, and that kind of put a kibosh on that for well, really permanently. I mean, you never know, but the thing that keeps me here, that keeps us here, is really, I mean, the people. I mean, the people here are just I always say there's no place like Jackson.
Yeah,
And,
right.
and every time something funny and a little off kilter happens, I'm like, well, yeah, that's Jackson for you. And we just, my wife grew up here as well, and she's been real involved in the community too. And so yeah, I guess that's kind of a meandering answer, but.
So my first question, I know the cool kids have some questions as well, but you have been able to record music, you put out product, but most of the time you're gigging. So you have kind of like you have your feet in both worlds in a sense. Being a gigging musician that plays regularly, but you also take the time out to actually record the music. So how do you balance the two? First of all, how do you make the two work, especially with being a husband and a father as well? And you probably have gigged more than you have put out music, I would guess.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be fair to say.
Definitely.
So how do you manage those two things, and which do you like better out of the two?
Well, I often point to one of my musical heroes, Peter Gabriel. He's about to put out his first new album of original songs in 20 years. So that makes me feel a little bit better. That, like, I'd love to be more prolific, but I really think for what I do, I mean, gigging feeds all of it, because it keeps you getting better at your instruments. And I play multiple instruments and singing and just knowing how to do it, how to interact with other professionals, and just getting better and better at it. Gigging, you probably heard the saying, a gig is worth 10 rehearsals, and I believe that.
On the good and the bad side.
That's right. That's right. You learn what to do and what not to do. There are times when I slow it down for family reasons, or maybe I'm more focused on recording. But I find that like performing and recording, or writing and recording, and all, which I kind of view as one thing, feed different sides of my creativity. Ultimately, I love writing new songs, putting those out, figuring out how to do it. I've gotten better at engineering my own stuff, and not as good as the real professionals, but good enough that I can get something down. That if I need someone to clean it up, then I can do that. It's they say with music, and I think they say this about acting too. If you're going to do it, you better be convinced that you can't do anything else, or that you can't not do it. I'll put it that way.
Right.
Or you would be lost without it. And I feel that way. I mean, family is going to be first for me, no matter what. But music is right behind that. Yeah.
So, being in music for as long as you have, and being all over the country and all that stuff, how difficult was it to live stream? Because I've noticed that you live stream a lot more than when I first heard you singing at the Mississippi Art Museum.
Yeah.
So, did you just sit down and say, you know what, this is where it's going, let me figure it out?
I wish I could say it was that well thought out, that I had some master plan, but I mean, the pandemic hit, and I work with a lot of people, but the guy I work with most, Chalmers Davis, he played with Little Richard for 24 years. He was a Muscle Shoals session guy for a long time. He's been around the block more than I have, and he more than me, because I do some other things for support my family. He really, I mean, he's just music, and when we were gigging pretty heavily when that hit.
Yeah.
And so it was a big chunk of income, and it was even though it was a big chunk for me too. And so we decided in the middle of that, in the crucible of all that, we decided we were going to try doing the Facebook Live thing, and just kind of learned it as we went. Then when things started coming back and the gigs started opening up again, most of the venues don't mind if I live stream anyway, and so I thought, well, why not do that? We're not so much trying to get tips now, even though we do get some, but it's more like we just want to make sure people are aware of what we're doing, and every now and then one of my former bosses sent me for the second time $100 tip the other night, and I'm like, man, that's first of all, it's really generous, but also it's good affirmation that someone's listening, that people actually care a little bit. You know? So.
Speaking of going all over the world, how receptive are different cultures as you travel? Do you have to change your style up a little bit, or?
You know, it's funny. This is going to sound kind of, because I do a lot of different kinds of music, and I sometimes get sort of labeled as a blues musician when I'm really kind of not. I mean, I'm more kind of a rock songwriter guy, but I've played a lot of blues. What's funny is the further away that you get from Mississippi, the more they want you to sound like you're from Mississippi. I mean, it's amazing. I've played in the Netherlands, Lithuania. I've played all around this country, and they love Mississippi musicians, especially in Europe. I mean, they you know, there's an old story about how when the Beatles first came to the U.S. and they landed at the airport, and there was a big press contingent meeting them, and someone asked a question, what do you want to see more than anything while you're here? And John Lennon said, Muddy Waters. And the reporter said, where's that? And he just looked at him and said, y'all don't appreciate your greatest treasures. And that's always kind of stuck with me, you know. And I do think there's a greater appreciation now, maybe because, you know, blues and jazz and classic rock and classic soul and even classic hip hop now have become part of just the American canon of culture. And I think there's more of a general appreciation for that now, but it always takes time. And you know, when Johnny Cash and Muddy Waters were singing about certain things, I mean, that was like the gangster rap of its time, you know. And it's taken a while, I think, for the mass culture to catch up with some of what these artists were doing, but I think we're getting there slowly.
Yeah.
You've done a lot in your music career over these past years and things like that. So, of course, there's a lot of memories. So what would you say is like a memory that you like think of like every time, like you just go back and like, oh my God.
So I've got two that I would probably name. So one, the obvious one is I got the chance to play with the Boston Pops at Symphony Hall in Boston in 2017, which was kind of mind-blowing, and you know, musically it was incredible to have something like that behind you, but also just the place and the history of it was amazing. The other thing I think about a lot was that when I played in Lithuania in 2005, and you know, got a great reception, had a Lithuanian band back. I mean, they could all play all this music perfectly. It was crazy. I mean, the keyboard player couldn't speak much English at all, but he could play anything you ever heard. And then the conversations I would have with the folks after. This was early in the Iraq War, so they were peppering me with a lot of questions about that and about American policy. Pretty direct, but polite questions. And then I found out, so I happen to be adopted, and I found out just a few years ago that I'm, on my biological father's side, I'm 100% on that side, Eastern European Jew, with a lot of relatives from Lithuania.
Wow.
And I always think back, like, you know, maybe I'm just projecting this onto what happened, but I feel like, you know, there was a connection there.
Absolutely.
You know, that may have been more primal than I even realized. You know? So I would say that those two moments, because number one, it was playing with this incredible cultural institution from our country, and then also getting to be doing that so far away was pretty cool too.
So we get a lot of bands in here, and we get a lot of, different genres of music in here, actually. But mostly with the bands, I like to ask this question because, you know, gigging is such an important part of, you know, the music scene here. And, you know, you have your contingent of people that, you know, get gigs and they do covers with a few originals here. Then you have some people that do all originals. And it's a mixed bag, kind of on the last side. So, you know, for an artist that's out there listening to you right now, because you gig so regularly and you're able to, you know, get a bit of revenue from being able to do shows, how did you get to the point where you began to gig so much? You know, give some advice to these artists that are listening right now on how you can build up your name and build up what you do to the point where you can consistently be booked as much as you are.
So off the top of my head, I would say 3, maybe 4 things. Number one, keep working at it. Just be gutsy and go out there and do it. Whether that means in the beginning, that may mean going to open mic and just starting there. And then if you're fortunate enough to get a gig somewhere, do it the best you can. But that leads into number 2: be a professional, and corollary to that is try to be a nice person.
Yes.
You know, it's amazing how far that goes. Now, it's not by itself.
Yeah.
It's not going to get you or
Right.
keep you the gig.
Right.
But people, and I'm like this myself, I'd rather deal with the guy or woman, whoever it is, that has very solid talent and is a professional over the one that might have a little bit more talent but is a nightmare to deal with.
Right.
I mean, it's just,
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
just,
That's
it's pretty
across the
straightforward. And then the other thing I would say is have a thick skin, because if you know when you start off, first of all, you're not gonna, no matter how talented you are, you're not going to be as good as you're gonna be 5 years later, and you're not gonna be as good then as you will be 5 years after that.
Right.
So be patient with yourself, but keep plugging away. Have a thick skin when you get feedback, or if you don't get called back for a gig, or you've played a gig at a certain place for a year or two, and then they go a different direction. And I have to remind myself of this. You know, try not to take it too personally. Take your work personally, but don't take yourself or the things that may happen along the way too personally, because it's not going to serve you well musically and professionally and work wise. It's also just, I mean, it's no way to live. You know, just getting bitter about it too much. Just, you know, obviously sometimes things happen and you have to stand up for yourself.
Right.
But you know, I think, you know, just stick with it, have a thick skin, and just be a pro and be a good person.
Be a
you know?
good person.
Yeah.
I think that's the running thing.
Man.
No, I was just like, that's my agreeing.
Oh, you was. That was a church thing. So we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we actually have another episode of Live from Studio A.
That's right.
We got Scott Albert Johnson who's going to be performing for us in studio, because this is Studio A.
Awesome.
Right, Java? Get it over with. Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, man. We'll be right back with Scott Albert Johnson live in the studio. So, Scott, what are you going to be doing for us today?
So I'm gonna do my next single, which is called "Invisible," and this is basically a song I wrote about sort of plunging ahead into an uncertain future, which I think we're all, as a culture, as a country, and as a planet, kind of dealing with right now. But it could be individual or personal or whatever. And it's kind of the second part of, I had a song that came out a couple years ago called "Float," which was about somewhat similar themes, and I think it's kind of where my head's been at with all the things that have been happening in the world. And also just, I had some, I'm doing better now, but I had some health stuff going on. And when you start, and it was really the first time in my life I'd ever dealt with anything like that. And you know, when you start dealing with new challenges, you know, you kind of got to, eventually you got to buck up, I guess.
Yeah.
And this song is about, you know, plunging ahead and kind of taking what comes, you know, good or bad.
Fantastic.
This is called "Invisible." I'm walking into something, staring into the sea, looking at the emptiness that's right in front of me, and the voices right behind me keep calling out my name. They wanna come along, they wanna play the same old game, but I'm staring at the invisible. I'm gonna find a way to see. I'm looking straight ahead into the eyes of who I'm gonna be. The space and time around me can't hold me anymore. It's just the beginning. This is just an open door. Stepping through it blindly, I'm looking for the light. searching what's inside of me. I'm finding my second side, and I know it looks invisible, but I'm gonna give it a try. Just take a look all around you. Can you see it now? Are you ready to testify? The days have just begun. The years are waiting for me. This is step number one. And I'm walking into the invisible. I'm gonna find a way to see the voices of the past are gone. And I'm here to find the future inside of me.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Yeah.
this is Scott
yeah.
Albert Johnson in the studio, live from Studio A right here on Third Coast Radio. So Scott, if folks want to get in touch with you, man, to book or just to follow the content you put out, give them all of the social handles and all the contact information.
So I'm on all the socials, I think. All the big ones: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I don't use Twitter that much for music, though. Honestly,
Yeah.
I sort of doom surf on
Yeah.
on Twitter. I go on for 10 seconds. Oh God, the world's still messed up. And I get back
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Facebook and Instagram, and then I have a website, ScottAlbertJohnsonMusic.com. I had ScottAlbertJohnson.com, and I forgot to renew it. And
Somebody grabbed it.
somebody in Vietnam owns it right now.
Wow.
Really?
I got to figure that out. But so
I'm sure they're ready
ScottAlbertJohnsonMusic.com.
to negotiate.
Yeah. I'll get my people on that.
Yeah, that's cool. We appreciate you for joining us, man. Scott
Thank
Albert
you so much for
Johnson,
having me, y'all. This is
right
great.
here in the studio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks
This
for
is
coming.
Third Coast Radio, guys. We're going to be right back with more music, all right?